you got the news
Yeah.
with your cancer, diagnosed with that. Can you remember that day or the sort of build up to it?
Do you know, I do. In the week building up to the game, I think we were playing Oxford at home, I think. And I noticed that one of my testicles was completely different to the other. It was large, heavy. It looked really strange. But I had some stitches in a shin wound, and it got infected, and I was on antibiotics. And my glands were up on the inside of my groins, and it was the same side. And I just assumed the glands are up on my groin. Something could have gone on with the testicle. I put it down to that. And I went to see the physio, Dave Williams at the time, and he laughed because it looked quite funny. And he said, well, look, we'll see the club doctor, Dr. Lazar, who sadly is no longer with us. And he, this was about an hour and a half, maybe, 15 minutes for the game. And I was on the bench getting a massage, and he came in to look at it. And as soon as he saw it, he said, you can't play today. And I'm like, what do you mean I can't play? He said, well, you need to go to the hospital. I'm like, gee, that's not really the reaction you want to see from a doctor. And I said to him, look, I'm playing. I'm in the team. I'm playing. We can do this afterwards, right? Anyway, they tried to arrange for me to have a scan Saturday after the game, and it couldn't be done. And I remember when the ball went out of play and in that game against Oxford, and my concentration just lost. Maybe someone was injured. And I remember just looking down at the ground and the grass thinking, what is this? And for a millisecond, cancer came into my head, just a millisecond. And then the game restarted. And on the Monday, they arranged a scan for me at a hospital up in Ipswich. And as I remember, it was 9 o'clock. So I lived in London at the time, so driving down, it wasn't too bad down the A12. But as I arrived at the hospital, there were two nurses waiting for me outside. And I remember thinking, who waits for someone outside? Who does that? And I went in, and within seconds, filled out whatever forms. And within, I reckon, less than 3 minutes, I'm on a table having an ultrasound. And within 10 seconds of this ultrasound, maybe 20, the guy doing it said, yeah, this is going to have to come out. And I remember going, what? My palms being incredibly sweaty. And he said, well, of course, I asked the question, there's so many questions. I said, is it a tumour? And he said, yes. And I said, is it cancerous? And he said, we don't know yet. We'll have to find out. But this is going to have to come out. So that was on the Monday morning. So I'm now driving back down to the A12. I phoned Dave Williams, the club, told them the situation, and went back home to my wife, who was in floods of tears. My mum had come over at this stage. Now, mum crying, and it's like, I felt quite fine about it. Actually, I wasn't as worried about it. I don't know why. Maybe because I was 27, fit. You're a little bit naive then. I think if I had that phone call now, the age I am now, I think I'd deal with it a very different way. But went up to hospital the next day, on the Tuesday. Again, everything was there, private hospital, everyone just waiting for me. And I went in and removed the testicle. And it was one of the most, I promise you, when I woke up from it, my wife was there. The pain was just unbelievable. Unbelievable. I was just woke up groaning, and then they just gave me some more morphine and knocked me out again. It was, as you can imagine, right?
Yeah.
And then I stayed in hospital for maybe a day, maybe two, went back home to recover. And then there was going to be 10 days between when the operation, and they were going to find out if it was cancerous. And we didn't have the internet. Well, there was internet, but I never had it. But I'd done as much info searching as I could, and all the classic signs of testicular cancer, they ticked a lot of boxes. And I knew I had it in my head. I had cancer. I just had it in my head. And then 10 days later, we go up to the Ipswich again, the meeting, and he just said, "I'm sorry to tell you, but it's cancerous." And my wife's in tears, and I'm sitting there going, right, I'd already dealt with this. So I knew I had cancer. What's the next step? And I went for x-rays, I went for scans, I went for blood tests. And luckily it hadn't spread because I found it at stage 1. And because of where the testicle is, it's away from the body. It's harder for it to spread. It can and it will. But at that particular time, I was very lucky, got it at stage 1. The testicle was removed. There was no other signs that it had spread to my lymph nodes. And then it said, well, you know, how do we move this forward? So then it was arranged the following week that I was going to have chemotherapy. But I felt fine. So I then went to the club. I went to the club and I remember sitting there with Dave Williams, the physio, George Berlin, Mr. Sheepshanks. And I had to, you know, in a boardroom, and it was very somber, you know, really somber. And I went in there and I said to them, look, just been told it is cancer. And they all, you know, all men there, I could feel them going, shit. This, you know, you all sensed that this aura in the room. And I said, look, I actually feel all right. I mean, I you know, because at that time we're going for promotion.
Yeah.
And I said, look, if it hasn't spread, I've only been out 2 weeks. Do I need the chemo now? Because the chemotherapy will just wipe me out. And I said to George, look, if I can put this to the end of the season, I'll find out. Anyway, the doctors weren't having it. They just were saying, look, you might not feel it, but you are ill. And you've got to deal with this now. I said, but, you know, if that's the advice you've got to give me, then that's the advice you've got to give me. And then the following week I had chemotherapy in a hospital up in Ipswich, and I stayed there for 2 days. And Ipswich actually were playing at home on the night. I was listening to the game on the radio while having chemotherapy, which was quite a surreal moment. But yeah, thankfully it didn't spread, and I couldn't get back fit for that season. I did try, but it was just pointless, completely pointless. So yeah, and then on to the next season.